I'm Jim Check. You're watching Now Media with me, Ian Burns, for the really big show where we kind of do news different. We got a little different spin on, less bias, or I don't know, people might say we're biased, but we definitely are not suffocating under government compromised media. That's the theme of our show today. Canada suffocating under government compromised media. The Liberals promise austerity budget. Temporary foreign workers. Who benefits? Who loses? Carney still has a car full of clowns. Crime in Canada taking center stage. And all that and a lot more on the really big show. As this show gets more popular, the more people come to it, then obviously there's a lot, some, I guess, negative comments, some positive comments, and then we'll take it all. As long as we got your attention, we'd like you to share, like, comment, dislike. Too bad there's not a dislike button. I'm sure there'll be a few people hitting that, but we're going to start off with the big news here that's happening and actually close to home here, and that's the big fire that's happening on the connector right now, or the Coquihalla. And that Coquihalla remains closed in both directions between Merritt and Hope right now, as the Mine Creek wildfire continues to burn out of control. So the BC wildfire did not take to action that fire for about 3 days, I believe. They said they couldn't get access to it. Now they're actually in there fighting that fire, but you know, obviously it's a lot larger now and a lot tougher to fight.
Yeah, it's 1,900 hectares now. That's the update. So that's more than 3 times. It's 4 times the size, more than 4 times the size, I think, what it was last night. So it's obviously growing quite rapidly. Evacuation order. There's an evacuation order, but it's just one property. So but it's quite a big one. So it looks like it affects like a ranch or something maybe. And then there's some alerts as well.
We got a couple of videos here we're going to play here for you just to show you the breadth of this fire. Maybe we'll do it without sound. That's pretty wild as you're driving through. That's, again, the highway there, and you see a helicopter in there. That's right close to the road there. And that's just, I think, prior to them closing the highway. And then we had one more.
Scary enough sometimes on that road, isn't it? You don't need that to add to the terror.
That second clip there. Reminds me of the day I worked for the Alberta Forestry Service. I was a hotshot driver up there for the Forestry Service, and I had to drive through stuff like that. And there's sometimes it was for miles and miles trying to get stuff out to the firefighters. And you just drive through the cut lines there and just drive like a bat out of heck to get stuff.
Bat out of heck. Did you ever see an animal affected? Because they go crazy, don't they, during the fires?
No, it was I worked for Alberta Forestry Service when I was a youngster. I believe I was 19 or so. And I was in northern Alberta, was almost, I think it was 1980 or something like that. And northern Alberta was almost all fully engulfed. Huge fires, like huge, massive fires in 1980. My job was hotshot. Pretty wild.
And did the Prime Minister of the time say that we needed to stop going on vacations and driving around to make sure that wildfires didn't happen anymore?
Climate change wasn't a factor back then. It was just half the province.
Something else.
Obviously.
Yeah.
They didn't bring that up. But here's the big news, I guess, from Mark Carney's government. They promised an austerity budget. Well, we'll see, I guess, right? He said yesterday that he will table an austerity budget this fall. Acknowledging the deficit was running 55% higher than forecast. How do you run a budget 55% higher than forecast? He says we need to set up the country to invest. The government needs to spend precious taxpayers' dollars carefully as possible. I got one to cut right now. The Sky Canada budget, $400,000, just shy of $400,000. You're paying somebody to stare out the window and answer the phone for aliens. 400 plus 7 employees. So what's that? $1 million easy. $1 million easy. Right there. There's $1 million, Mr. Carney. Just call up Sky Canada.
It's usually a lot more than just the salaries, isn't it? There's all the benefits and pensions and stuff like that. It'll probably be quite a pretty penny when you add it all up.
Here you go, Mr. Carney. You call up Sky Canada and say there's an asteroid headed towards your office. You need to close up because your department is over.
I mean, it's a luxury, isn't it? I suppose that's the fairest way to look at that. That is something that has to be considered a luxury. It might be, it might be cute and it might be nice and they might come out with something interesting now and then, but ultimately it's a luxury, isn't it? So that is the kind of thing that's going to have to get the chop. But I think, I'm sorry to say, based on my observations of Mr. Carney and certainly his predecessor and the Liberal machine in general, I would say that the only things that are going to get cut are the things that won't cost them votes, because everything is patronage now.
And watch how the media treats it, though, because if the Conservatives said austerity budget, they'd be screaming about you're cutting healthcare, you're cutting children's things, But this is the question you get from Portland. Will this be an austerity budget? It will be, and then Carney, it will be an austerity budget together as an investment-based focus budget. The growth rate of federal expenditure in the past decade is 7% year over year. We must stop this trend. Who did that? Who did that?
I mean, an interesting question would be what you just said. This is your fault. Sort of like, take the L. Like this is on you. When are you going to admit that you screwed up the finances of this country, or your party did? That's one question. But then the other question is, how can you stand here and say that with a straight face when you and your entire party has just campaigned in an election and won that election by saying that the other guy's going to cut everything and you're going to keep services, you're going to pay for things, you're going to keep all expenditure in place? How can you stand there and say this? It's cruel, I think, to the neutral observer to look on and see that. It's just not fair.
I think what he's going to do is separate investment from the budget. You know what I mean? He says we're going to build. And here's the sad thing. He also blamed, the Trudeau Liberals. And then you have to ask the question, you were the economic advisor, were you not? And is it not the same car full of clowns that you had before?
Yeah, it's the same personnel.
Yeah. So you have to wonder, and this is they promised this, and then here's this other thing here, that Carney's cabinet on the hunt for spending cuts, and here's they're going again. We need to cut, but they're going away on a cabinet retreat to talk about cuts. Maybe cut the cabinet retreat, right? Just pick up the phone, a Zoom call, right?
You've mentioned, obviously, it's a particularly egregious, almost like comical example, isn't it? That looking for aliens person that gets $400,000 a year with a team of staff. That's very funny, and it does highlight waste, doesn't it? But if we want to talk about big ticket items, it's what we were talking about yesterday, wasn't it? It was that corporate welfare, which has not just been corporate welfare and then had a bit of success or continued into the future, but it's corporate welfare and then it's just died. It's basically setting fire to money.
We're going to talk about it later.
When are we going to hear conversations about that from Mark Carney? When is Mark Carney going to hold his finance minister to account, who was involved in a lot of that?
We're going to talk about that later too, because we're going to talk about Northvolt, billions of dollars in corporate welfare. And who did the CBC, the government compromised media, blame? Who did they blame for that? Not Northvolt. Not the decisions by the Liberal government, but no, they blamed Trump. We had nothing to do with the failure of Northvolt or any of these other EV corporate welfare schemes that they put into place. But even Vasi Kapelas here, we're going to play a clip here, points out that it doesn't make sense. But let's listen to Vasi here.
A lot of questions, I'm sure, for the Prime Minister today about the budget and him talking about he wants the Liberal government to rein in their spending, but he's also talking about large-scale investments. What are you going to be watching for today as these meetings continue?
Well, let me put a fine point on it, Anne-Marie, because as you mentioned, the finance minister is there. If I were there and not here, my first question to him would be, what is an austerity budget? Because that is what the Prime Minister in French yesterday said the budget would be, an austerity budget and an investment budget. Picture a Conservative a few years ago, let's say, if they were in office, saying, hey, Canadians, you're going to get an austerity budget, you can imagine the reaction would be, well, you're going to cut healthcare, you're going to cut education, you're going to cut transfers to provinces. But they have promised at the same time not to do that. So the math, to put it plainly, doesn't add up at this point. You can't have an austerity budget and spend $9 billion on defense and all the transfers to provinces and all of the benefit programs that you have in place. Like, how does that add up? Or does austerity not mean austerity in the traditional sense of the word that we would understand it in a fiscal sense? So far there have been no details, again, provided. Just wait for the budget, we're told, wait for the budget in October. But if Canadians will be on the receiving end of less program spending, that is something I think a lot of people watching this morning would want to know.
CTV's chief political correspondent, Vash.
Yeah, if Pierre Poilievre was standing up there in austerity budget, the CBC would be just losing their minds.
But I just feel like they should be losing their minds all the more, because the guy who is talking about an austerity budget is the same guy that said no cuts. We're just going to cap employment in the public service, and slammed Pierre Poilievre, used that as a main attack line, that he was going to cut everything. I feel like the hypocrisy, that's what's supposed to be like a red rag to a bull for a journalist. They're supposed to see hypocrisy and just turn green and become the Incredible Hulk, aren't they? But not in this country. They see hypocrisy like that, and it's just kind of, oh well.
Well,
it's not even mentioned.
To be fair, on one side, if they seen the hypocrisy from Pierre Poilievre, they would be losing their mind. So it's not hypocrisy that they have a problem with. It's hypocrisy from the right that they have a problem with. On the left, they just continue to defend whatever it is. And
this is why I sort of defend sometimes the New York Times and CNN in the sort of American context, because they do that job. They scrutinize the right. They scrutinize the Republican Party obviously from a very biased perspective, but they do that job. And Fox, and to a much lesser extent, Wall Street Journal and a few other publications do it in the other way. The sad thing about Canada is we don't really have that diversity. We don't have a sort of pluralistic media landscape.
All they have is us. All they have is us. It's a small audience. If you want to help get this out there, you got to help us get a bigger audience. That's what you really got to do. Because, and if you like what's going on, here's Francois Philippe Champagne telling you that the pot's not getting hotter, that it's all fine because you just got yourself $70. So here's why. Again, we do the fool of the day. We keep forgetting to do it most of the time, but here you go. Francois Philippe Champagne telling you what the success is right here.
How can we address how we can make life more affordable for Canadians? And in that, the measure we took to reduce the middle class tax cut that we offered to Canadians was really spot on, because what we've heard from families is to help us to make life more affordable.
$70 a month. How do you feel?
But also, why has he come out and said that? For certain nerds such as myself, who check all of the major polling companies to see what their latest publications are, you'll know today, if you're like me, that a new report just came out about cost of living being a priority, people being less bothered about Trump and tariffs and things like that. And all they're really bothered about is the bottom line and how much it costs to survive in this country. Sure enough, out pops the finance minister, and I watched this when he did it live earlier, and it was just the first thing he did. He made some sort of crap joke about how he missed the press over the summer, and then he just went, "We know that it's all about cost of living. It's like, so you read that poll too then, and now you're saying when we speak to Canadians, they tell us no. When you read the data from polling companies, that's what tells you what to think. I just thought. They just get away with it, don't they? Because nobody else really reads polls or cares about that sort of thing. But all the sort of the nerd class know exactly what's going through his head.
So if you're listening right now or watching, the $70 a month, I think everything's fine then, right? You got $70 a month. Should be great.
Yeah, I mean, that would get you. What would that get you in bananas? How many bananas would that get? About 50 bananas. That'll do, won't it?
And then the other part of our headline was who benefits from this temporary foreign worker program? Because here's Justin Trudeau back in 2014. Listen, look what he says. Temporary foreign worker program lowers Canadian wages and exploits vulnerable people, and it needs to be fixed. Until he realized
you're missing something. You've missed something. You need to read that hashtag, and that answers all your questions.
Right, yeah, he blamed the CPC for it. Right?
So
the Conservatives,
their temporary foreign worker program, not the Liberal one. The Liberal one's great.
so they just think, so the Liberals just put it on steroids and then just like ramped it up to an unbelievable level, because obviously the little bit that the CPC was doing was bad, but when you like ramp it up and actually, you know, like really crater healthcare so people can't access a doctor, rents on the rise because there's not enough rents, all the things, and then young people can't find jobs. That's the better way. But who's benefiting from this? Who benefits from the temporary foreign workers? Let's listen to Mark Carney first, double down, because Pierre came out and says he wants to end the temporary foreign workers program. But here's Mark Carney doubling down on it.
Time to shut the program down.
Well, I would say the following, which is that that program has a role. It has to be focused in terms of its role. And it's part of what we're reviewing. It's part of what we will be discussing, how well the temporary foreign worker program is working and how our overall immigration system is working. We've been absolutely clear as a government that we want, and we're putting in place policies so that the overall level of immigration as a proportion of the population will decline from around 7% today to around 5% several years from now. Now, the biggest contributor to immigration is not temporary foreign workers. It's a variety of other factors. And I will say, je vais répéter en français parce que c'est important, when I talk to businesses around the country, particularly in Quebec, but elsewhere across the country, their number one issue is tariffs, and their number two issue is access to temporary foreign workers. Okay? Et pour le moment, c'est une des grandes.
Yeah. There you go. Like Justin Trudeau says, temporary foreign workers lowers Canadian wages, exploits vulnerable people, and needs to be fixed.
But like I said, he sounds to me, I just happened coincidentally to be reading about the history of the Spanish conquest of Latin America right now. And he could literally be a conquistador. That's what the way he's speaking there. The number one concern I'm hearing from Spanish landowners in Central America is they need more access. They need access to more Aztec workers and indigenous workers to come and work on the farms. It's the same story throughout history. And yet here's Mark Carney, who we're told has a brain bigger than Manitoba, coming out and he's just regurgitating these lines. It's like he doesn't seem to hear himself. He doesn't know what he's saying. Of course, giant businesses and oligarchs and all the rest and monopolists are going to want cheap labor, because that class of people has wanted that throughout the entire history of our species. Big surprise.
To be fair, I don't know what he said either. He doesn't know what he said. I don't know what he said. He says a lot of things to try and cloud the issue when it's clear what he is saying. Again, if you just take out all the unnecessary words and the unnecessary things, it's clear as what he's saying, is that this is for the benefit of the few again, the businesses that are screaming for it. Again, here's Brian Lilly says, like if this was the other way around, they would be screaming about this, but CBC would be apocalyptic. But, if it's, Carney and it's a liberal, then it's all good.
As we've said many, many times, it's clear as day, isn't it? If you're in denial about that, then God help you. You need to open your eyes.
And then this is from Hollywood and Blacklocks. Employers use migrant labor programs for attracting talent. And that's from the Department of Immigration briefing note. Conservative MPs yesterday called for the wind down of the temporary foreign worker program as unemployment for Canadian students reached a 15-year high. Again, who wins, who loses? Who wins, who loses, right? Nearly 1.6 million foreigners were let into Canada last year under the temporary foreign worker program, and it's similar but separate international mobility program. Taken together, these two programs accounted for close to 1.5 work permit holders in 2024, equal roughly to 7.5% of Canada's total labor workforce.
That doesn't account for, that also doesn't include students as well, international students, because they can also work a certain number of hours. I can't remember what it is now. They changed it, didn't they? But I think it might be about 40 hours a week they can work. So basically, that's a massive source of labor as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and we have up to 20% jobless rate for young people here. Stats Canada and the Labour Force Survey said last month, youth unemployment 15-year high, and it's trended up for the past 2 years. And they keep saying they need more workers, talent. I guess our youth are untalented, unskilled, and unworthy. Unemployment for school-age job seekers, 15 to 24, range as high as 20.3% in Alberta, followed by Ontario, 16, New Brunswick, 14, Nova Scotia, 14, Newfoundland, 14, Saskatchewan, 12, BC, 12. Many young Canadians cannot imagine buying a home, starting a family without a good paying job, yet they can't secure those jobs without experience, which they can't gain because they can't find an entry-level job. And that's from Rempel Garner.
Just to correct myself there, it's actually as of relatively recently, it's 24 hours a week students can work, but that's still a lot of work, isn't it?
And then Carney goes on to say, like, it doesn't really affecting the youth unemployment. But there's a report here from Desjardins. It says, whoops, teenage workers hit hard by tech disruption and population growth. You can go back. Yeah,
I mean, even they've kind of like fudged it a bit there, haven't they? And they've said population growth. It's like all those Canadians having children. The reality is that I believe Statistics Canada put it at 98% of all population growth in Canada in the last few years has been down to immigration. And the other 2% isn't Canadians having kids. It's older people living longer than expected. So the population ends up being like, even though there's such a low birth rate, you still end up having extra people because older people are living longer.
And if we go back to the theme of our show, government compromised media and Canadian press, government compromised media, that's why they don't have it in there. Hit hard by population growth. They should put in there.
But I also think it's like an attempt at sort of being polite or something, isn't it? I think people consider that to be good manners. It's like, oh no, I wouldn't mention immigration. It's merely population growth. It's like, well, why is the population growing? Come on.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? And talking about, we also, part of our theme today is the clowns in the car. And here's one of the biggest clowns. He's actually an activist and extremist, and he's still in government. And the Pierre Poilievre pointing it out. I don't know, you're going around here. Did you find that slide there? The guy who wants, remember when he came out and said they didn't want no roads built in Canada, no new roads, no pipelines, no gas, no nuclear, pretty much everything else. So according to Stephen Guilbeault, everything has to be green or you live in a gunny sack and you just sit in your hole. And But he's great to be with colleagues in the Prime Minister at the cabinet meeting. And if Carney wants to show he's serious, he needs to get rid of Stephen Guilbeault. He needs that.
Well, and several other people.
Yeah, Jolie.
But it's no coincidence that almost all of those people,
Fraser,
almost all of those people are Quebec-based. We're talking about Champagne, Jolie, Guilbeault. You know, these are like the Quebec flag wavers, aren't they? It's important to have that and have them in a prominent position. I'm increasingly of that opinion.
They are also part of the group, like key players in what Carney is basically now coming out and saying was part of the Liberal failure. Like they were the key players in that Liberal failure. You know what I mean? Trudeau, Freeland, second in command, Champagne, Jolie, Anita Anand, Stephen Guilbeault, Sean Fraser. Look at Sean Fraser. He's like a trifecta. He's got, look at where immigration is when he left it. Look at where housing is when he left it. And now look at crime. We're going to talk about crime here in a bit. Crime is just catastrophic here in Canada.
I feel like Champagne has got a pretty impressive list of jobs behind him as well. Right? Innovation and industry and now finance.
He has a wake of disaster behind him. And plus, you know, to come out and gaslight Canadians and say that Canadians should be happy because they got $70 a month. And most Canadians don't even
And his mother also coming out saying, my mother told me that I should cut spending. It's like, okay.
I know they're not serious politicians. The only serious politician is Tim Hodgson. And I believe Mark Carney is actually a serious guy. He's a smart guy, but I don't know what game he's playing. But if he wants to show he's serious, more Tim Hodgsons, less clowns.
But I guess, you know, he's joined the clown society, hasn't he? So he has to have a certain number of clowns on his management team.
Well, the government corrupted media has really done a good job of making Danielle Smith seem like the devil. But we're going to listen to Danielle Smith here for a couple minutes, talking about she has a solution for Canada. I just wonder why Carney won't listen.
The economy is suffering right now. We've had an inflation crisis, high unemployment, declining GDP, capital investment fleeing Canada for other countries, massive federal deficits, and of course, the U.S. tariff threat, which has exposed just how dependent we are on one single country for the vast majority of our exports. It's been a tough go lately. But what if I told you that we could help solve every single one of these problems with just a couple of key policy changes by our federal government? What if there was a way to create hundreds of thousands of jobs, attract back hundreds of billions in investment capital, bolster GDP growth, diversify our trade markets, and flow new revenues to federal and provincial budgets, all without spending a single tax dollar? Does that sound too good to be true? Well, it isn't. And all that stands in the way is just some common sense and a bit of courage by our Prime Minister. You see, Canada has among the largest supply of valuable natural resources on Earth. On a per-person basis, our endowment of natural resources far exceeds China, Europe, Russia, and even the United States. And it's not particularly close. We have incredibly fertile lands and oceans, unmatched supplies of timber, uranium, and potash, and a treasure trove of critical minerals in every province and territory. And one more thing, we literally live on top of more than 1 trillion barrels of oil and more than 1 quadrillion cubic feet of natural gas. These oil and gas resources represent an astounding tens of trillions of dollars in potential wealth for our country. That means hundreds of thousands of new great paying jobs, hundreds of billions in...
If you watch this show, we've been saying that for months and months and months. Canada is the richest nation in the world by diversity. And that's the diversity, DEI in Canada. By diversity, Canada is the richest nation in the world. Yet guys like Stephen Guilbeault have stopped us from cutting down trees, pumping oil, shipping potash, uranium, all those things have been kiboshed by a Liberal government. And you can talk to many, many people. And it's just been roadblock, regulation. And then what happens with all that? You see capital flee this nation. And if you talk to world leaders from other countries, like the Polish ambassador laughing at us, saying they already buy our LNG, but they buy it from the Americans. It's because we're a laughing stock in the world, because we're sitting on all these. Which other nation in the world would squander the riches that we have? I can't think of. It's a hard
one to answer that, isn't it? Yeah, how do you answer that question? Even the Americans under Biden, and particularly under Obama, they didn't play this game at all. Obama was pretty gung-ho on a lot of natural resources. It's very strange, isn't it? I mean, even Al Gore, when he was vice president, the Americans weren't shy about exploiting their natural resources. I really think it might just be Canada. Certainly off the top of my head, I struggle to think of any other country.
I can't think of it, but I mean, there's not many nations that are rich in resources like Canada, and I can only name a few: the American, U.S., Russia, Canada.
Saudis, I guess, and
China.
And China actually has.
Well,
quite
Saudis
a lot,
have one resource. They have really one. They have oil. They have oil and gas.
A lot of it.
And silica and sunshine. They have solar. I mean, that's
sunshine, sand, and they've got some pretty good horse breeding stock and camels.
Yeah, but
that's
worth
something.
But Canada has it all, right? And we squander it all. It's not like we're really working on. Then the one thing we come up with that we suck at more so is like we need to build more wind generation. Right now, the wind generation on top of the Coquihalla is at risk.
I mean, wind is for countries like Britain that have just got themselves into a terrible situation, and they just have nothing. They don't really have sunshine. They do have oil and gas, but they hate that, and they don't want to get it. So the British are almost in a position where, and the Germans to a lesser extent, they just don't have anything else. So wind is like last resort. Really, it should be nuclear if they were being sensible. But Canada doesn't need to mess about with wind, because they have basically each province in Canada has various options to power the economy. So we don't need to mess around with those options.
If Canada was a corporation and your board of directors were squandering the resources of the corporation, they would be fired. And here in Canada, they just They, you know, like they say, well, we don't need any of that stuff. That stuff is for the old economy. What we need is we're going to create this new, clean, green economy that's going to, like, the world's going to envy, and we're going to lead it. Well, we're going to lead it because nobody else is playing. China's not playing. India's not playing. Russia's not playing. US is not playing.
The Americans, yeah.
Even the UK.
I mean, the Europeans are a little bit, but the Europeans become more and more irrelevant as each day passes. Like, who cares what they do? They're not important enough.
Let's shift our focus here. We're going to talk about the thing that's on everybody's mind right now, and that's crime. It's absolutely becoming center stage here in Canada right now. And we're going to play this little clip here. This happened in York here. Let's play this little clip here. That's good.
But don't you dare lay a finger on those boys, on those upstanding citizens.
I would say right now, if you have half of a brain, you might be wanting to go down to the dog kennel and see where you can find yourself a Doberman.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's what's going to happen. Do you know what I mean? Like, because, I don't know, like, if you're not allowed to protect yourself, because here we got some stuff here. Here's this next tweet here. I thought I had the clip of this one too. But where this is from the past there, where the police said if you're contributing money to the truckers convoy, they'll track you down, even if it takes them months. They'll track you down. And we have the sentencing coming up for Chris Barber and Tamara Litch here right away here. These are the people that they go after. But when it comes to home invaders, it's best to comply with these people. Do you have the clip? Let's play the clip here, because it's just a good memory.
Who are involved in this protest, we will actively look to identify you and follow up with financial sanctions and criminal charges. Absolutely. This investigation will go on for months to come. If you are involved in this protest, we will...
Is that this reminds me of an SNL skit from the Coneheads. The guy in the background.
I just love that guy in the background there with the scary eyes and the mask.
The scary eyes and the mask, right?
He's ready to get you.
But hey, if it comes to people stabbing you and stuff like this, the Canadian police chief tells citizens if they're attacked, they should comply with the criminals. And then CTV put out this tweet, and a man who was previously convicted in a stabbing death has been charged in connection with a stabbing, imagine that, at Canadian Tire parking lot last month.
Stabby, stabby. That's
and
not
then,
good, is it, really?
We're seeing the same thing play out in Britain, and here's some Babylon Bee that basically, we've talked about this. A British man forced to use finger guns to fight off knife attacks. Because, like that guy that broke into the house there in Ontario with a crossbow, and then the homeowner, I believe, used a knife, and he was charged. So the Conservatives have launched a campaign called Stand on Guard, which they want to kind of like mimic the law in the United States, the Castle Law. Because again, we've highlighted this many times. In Canada, you could get charged for protecting your home, your family, and yourself. In the United States, they tell you to shoot the person and make sure they're dead so they can save the taxpayer some money in court costs. And in Canada, you're supposed to leave your keys, according to the Toronto police, there at the front door. So when they come in there, that hopefully that satisfies them, that they just steal your car. Maybe leave your wallet, your keys, and all the, put a sign up and say, all my valuables are right here. But I guess if
But
they
what
want to
about
rape
if
your
you-
children, then what do you do there? What do you offer them then?
Yeah, I mean, it's extraordinarily bleak, isn't it? But I was just going to say, you mentioned in Florida, that one in Florida where they said just shoot them. You know, quite a few people in Canada have guns as well, but it's interesting to discuss the law on guns in this country because they have to be like hidden away and locked in a cabinet and all sorts of things, don't they? Otherwise, you're committing a crime. So the idea that you could use a gun to defend yourself in your home, the law is already set up in such a way that almost to make that impossible. So, I mean, looking at this thing from the Tories, I think it's quite a complex problem, isn't it? And there are quite a few areas that they're going to have to address, and it's going to have to be done. If they form a government, it's going to have to be done in Parliament with laws, changes to the law.
Well, Parliament only sits for 73 days, so it's tough to get anything done in Parliament. So,
well, to the credit of Pierre Poilievre, he hasn't talked about it very much lately, but he did say if he was elected back during the election that he would skip the summer recess, didn't he? He did promise that.
he's a workaholic. We don't want that in Canada.
Nah.
Even our own mayor here, Tom Dias, has sent a letter to Sean Fraser there, and I think they had a conversation that they want bail reform. And this is a letter from the city of Kelowna that went to Sean Fraser, the justice minister. And he says he shares an example in here, and I think it's about the third paragraph in, of a chronic offender profile shared by RCMP. The individual has accumulated 223 files between 2021 and 2025, including 31 failures to comply with conditions and 32 failures to appear. That didn't even show up in court.
15 repeat offenders in Kelowna are responsible for 1,335 police files. I mean, it just blows your mind, doesn't it? It's like
liberals.
the answer is staring you in the face.
Liberals,
Put
like
those
it's
people
right here.
away.
And Sean Fraser said it's not the wild, wild west. What is this when people don't even show up for court cases, yet they just continue to get released? Because he gets caught all the time. Yeah, obviously, right? 223 files.
I mean, I think there's the fella in Penticton who is like world famous at this point. I think he might have even more than that. But it's like every town has someone like that who's basically like a kind of celebrity because they've been charged hundreds of times, and there they are in the streets just like having a laugh.
I mean, this is a government that doesn't take crime serious, and it doesn't take the people. I mean, I've had so many people text me and email me recently and say, Jim, what do we do? What do we do? Like, I mean, I don't feel safe in my home anymore, especially this. Like, I mean, businesses downtown. I've been provided 15 minutes from the Minister for Community Safety here, the NDP minister. So we get 15 minutes to ask some questions, and hopefully we don't get filibustered on some of the answers. But
I have a feeling that what he will say, certainly what he can say, what his boss David Eby said, is this is all the fault of Ottawa. It's almost too easy.
Yeah, a lot of it is, but the decriminalization thing is their thing. That's their thing.
But it's also, rhetoric and atmosphere matters. When you have the bully pulpit, as you like to say, you can like set the tone to an extent. That's something that Doug Ford tries to do in the process, makes himself look ridiculous. But you can at least set the tone, and you can do what you can. You can try and change the conversation, but instead that doesn't happen. It feels like there's a minority of people, in other words, like the ruling class, the rulers of Canada, who they see crime as it's like a way for them to pity the people who commit crime. It's like, oh, what is it that made you commit crime? Like, how can we make things better in your life so that you don't want to go and stab people? Yeah. But that isn't how the majority of Canadians think. So it's like this tyranny of the minority, in this case, an ideological minority.
If you can still stomach government-funded, corrupted media, you can go watch the way they treat Pierre Poilievre when he brings out a thing, and even the treatment of some of the stories they do on crime, or the stories they don't do on crime, and you can kind of see how this should be on every news story, steady. Like a 3-year-old was raped in a home invasion.
Well, the Canadian press, we talked about when Quebec refused that money to fix systemic racism. That was a Canadian Press article, a very long article, and it had very sympathetic treatment in that article of the idea that depending on your skin color, you should be given these assessments before you're sentenced, so that you and make it easier for you to get bail and bring your sentence down as well if you are sentenced. I mean, this is the attitude. The Canadian Press journalist that wrote that represents that sort of minority of people that thinks that when crime occurs, it's an opportunity to go and put your arm around the criminal.
No, they're the victim. Let's talk about more in the government compromised media here. This is 2018 green investing is the way of the future. Let's invest in Northvolt, and then Northvolt goes bankrupt. And then we lost everything. And then this is the point here. This is the point. And this is complete gaslighting. We're going to play it again. We played it yesterday. I just want to drive this point home with the gaslighting that happens from the CBC. Look at this.
And frankly, industrial policy generally has had a really rough summer, especially in manufacturing, of course, because of these trade issues. Yesterday, for example, the latest sign of this word from the Quebec government that it is going to be pulling the plug on its partnership on Northvolt's much touted but very troubled electric battery plant in rural Quebec. That is 3,000 jobs that aren't going to materialize, several hundred millions of dollars of taxpayer money that's down the drain.
This has nothing to do with trade. Nothing to do with trade. Northvolt was a dead duck like a long time ago, and as many other ones, and we listed those yesterday. But here's CBC complete gaslighting, feeds their base of saying, Donald Trump cost more jobs in Canada. This has nothing to do. This has to do with failed liberal policy, failed liberal corporate welfare. And we talked about at the beginning of the show, where do they cut? Where do they cut money? How about all this corporate welfare? How many billions given to Honda, which now is a stalled plant? How many billions were given to Stellantis for failed EV plants? Bright Drop, where they closed the plant, and then this Northvolt. How many millions and millions and billions of dollars has been wasted on these EV dreams when they won't even talk to Tesla, the only people making an electric vehicle worth buying? Other than Ford.
And to be fair, Tesla benefited from quite a lot of subsidies as well. But at least with Tesla, you were subsidizing a winner, what's proved to be a winner. Even at the time of this, when this announcement was made about Northvolt, I don't think people were talking about it as like a great world-conquering winner. When you did have that up, I suppose it's right. Tesla then, 2018, was already recognized as a pretty successful company.
You know what? Who still wins in this? Tesla, because it's the EV mandate. Guess who the manufacturers have to buy EV credits from, or green credits from? They're going to have to buy them from Tesla, because Tesla doesn't have any carbon footprint, right? Do you know what I mean? So car makers that don't hit Ottawa's arbitrary target, which will be all of them except Tesla, will have to buy credits from Tesla. Tesla sells billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of the credits because they don't need them, so they sell them to other manufacturers. That's the scheme that Brookfield runs. They sell carbon credits. That's the whole scheme that Mark Carney is running right now. So the carbon credits, if you want to pump oil and gas, you got to buy carbon credits. And who sells carbon credits? Tesla. They make billions of dollars selling credits. This EV mandate, even though the liberals, some of the liberal MPs call Elon Musk a Nazi and a threat to Canada. it's like comedy. Like it's carnival.
If you want to have a laugh, if you want to enjoy a bit of comedy, I would say consider this: that economists,
next one,
and even the great Mark Carney and people like that will add this purchasing of carbon credits, just a complete fantasy, just a ridiculous nonsense act, this transaction. They will count that as GDP. So GDP goes up because these companies exchange this meaningless, ridiculous fantasy of a carbon credit. So something to bear in mind when you think other countries aren't doing that, and then you look at their GDP figures. Something to consider.
What you can do is you can sell some of your carbon credits to the auto manufacturers. You can take a picture in your yard of all your trees and send that into the auto manufacturer and say, there's some carbon capture for you. Can you send me a check?
Yeah. What about all the times I choose not to drive or fly or something like that? Do I get an allotment every year where I can have like 10 flights a year? And if I take none, do I get money? from people like Mark Carney.
We talk about government compromised media. This looks like it's a sponsored post. Look at this from CTV. Parks Canada visit increased by 10% with Canada's Strong Path, Ottawa says. If that's the best they got to promote, if that's the best tout they have for what they've accomplished, well, how long have they been in power now? 100 days?
But also, how on earth are you going to, how can you clearly prove that 10% increase is because of that Canada Strong Pass? Could it not be because of this like groundswell and patriotism that we've heard so much about, where people want to stay home for their vacations? Maybe that's what did it. Not this like
doing?
Pretty feeble offer from the government to let kids go free to parks.
What's CTV doing putting this out, though? That's the bigger question. It's a tout. Why are they putting out this 10%? Like, it's huge, right? Like, here's a liberal success story. Is it? Is it?
Yeah, is it? I mean, seeing quite a lot of fires going on. Maybe some of these people started fires. This extra 10%, then it's backfired, doesn't it?
MLA Eleanor Storker put this out here, and we talked about crime. NDP Health Minister Josie Osborne refuses to speak to media about the safe supply scandal. This is what's been going on here. There was a Liberal NDP program here, test piloted in British Columbia. A leaked health ministry presentation earlier this year confirmed that millions of NDP taxpayer-funded safe supply pills were being trafficked by provincially, nationally, internationally by alleged fraud by 60-plus pharmacies and medical professionals who facilitated the diversion. Despite the NDP promising to investigate pharmacies, they're still giving kickbacks to patients, and other pharmacies is opening.
It's the same story, isn't it? What, like the fact that these people we must repeat it as many times as we can and as loudly as we can. These people are our servants. We need to say that very loudly. What kind of servant would refuse to answer your questions this consistently, this audaciously and arrogantly? Would you keep that servant in your employment if they did that? You know what I mean? Like, they desperately need to start behaving themselves. And I think people hate the media, right? We get it, whatever. But often the media is kind of, we're at the front of the line and we're representing lots of other people. So when they treat us like this and they ignore us, it's the people at large that they're disrespecting. And, you know, I just wish there was a bit more anger.
This is not just a rant for Ian and Jim. And this one here, as a CPA, this one makes me wonder, like, why wouldn't we want this? Why wouldn't we want accountability, an independent auditor general? Why wouldn't we want that? The Conservatives are calling for an independent auditor general for all the money that's being spent. They love, the Liberals and NDP love, to redact and not release documents and that, because it just embarrasses them. Like Holly Dono Blacklocks is such a thorn in their side. All this
she
stuff
is
she
kind
exposes,
of like an auditor in a way, isn't she?
Yeah. All the stuff she exposes. How many other media outlets pick up her stuff? Just independent people like us, and it's a bunch of independent people on X. But like the CBC don't cover her stuff, right? Some of like the Sky Canada thing. Like, unless you've been watching us or Holly Dono Blacklocks, who knows about Sky Canada? Because I talk to people about it and they're just like, what? What is Sky Canada?
Yeah. I feel like in part it's embarrassment though as well, because Blacklocks does a much better job than CBC of holding power to account and has a tiny fraction of their influence and their income and all the rest of it, their revenues. I feel like in part CBC, they're probably just humiliated that they're so bad at their job that they're being upstaged by a couple of sort of retired journalists who have a blog on the side for a laugh.
If they took that $1.5 billion, if they gave it to you and I to dole out to people like Holly Dono and Blacklocks and other journalists out there that are actually doing the work, like Rob Shaw here in Vancouver, and that, what a difference we could make to hold power accountable. Instead, we have a government-compromised media that props up power and is basically the mouthpiece, the town criers. Mm. NDP has announced they will seize 25% of donations to their candidates and triple the run fee for the leadership. They're in financial ruin. But Jagmeet, again, he's one of the top gaslighters of all. They should go on the show. Jagmeet and Justin, the dynamic destruction duo.
That sounds like a future podcast coming to the App Store soon, isn't it?
Yeah, they should do that. They
iTunes.
should just how to destroy the wealthiest nation in the world. How to bring the youth to their knees, and how to convince the boomers, the old people, to sell out the youth in Canada. How to do that? Not sure. And then here's another one. This is I haven't followed this one too much, but that Keenan Bexte, I think he was with Rebel before. Now he's with Juno News, and he's being criminally investigated for a story that he did. And they're putting that. This was CBC though that put out an article on it. Watch what you tweet. New election law chills speech, says critics. And this is he's being investigated and threatened to be thrown in jail for some of the work he did in the election of one of the candidates, the Liberal candidates, that the Liberals ended up dumping.
Yeah, it was something like an accusation, wasn't it, of assault or something like that. And then he said that he tried repeatedly to get a comment from this person, this candidate, and didn't get one. I mean, the thing is, they say this is a chill on free speech and all the rest of it. I think the reality is this wouldn't have happened if it was a CTV reporter or a CBC reporter. It's because of who this guy is, because he's looked at as an enemy, isn't he? He's not looked at as a journalist. He's looked at as a sort of foe.
Justin Trudeau banned him from many. They marched him out of events and that. Mark Carney also, I think, has banned some reporters from events and stuff like that too. And when the government decides who's media and who's not media, that's when you know that the media's in trouble in Canada. Here's some good news though.
Is he also the one that chased him down on Tofino and Long Beach?
Yeah, that's the guy.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, they'll have this guy's face on a dartboard, won't they? They'll absolutely despise this guy, and that is the reason. I'm sorry to say, if anybody out there that believed in, the glorious principles of democracy and all the rest of it, forget about it. It's because of who he is. And if this was done by, some old crank at the CBC, then there'd be no concern whatsoever. But obviously, that person at the CBC would never do this in the first place. They would never investigate a story like this.
We got some good news. Look at WestJet. WestJet's buying 67 more jets. That's their biggest purchase ever. And they're buying them from Boeing. Boeing is headquartered in Seattle there. So big deal for Boeing. Boeing's got some big deals from a lot of different places, including the Saudis. Remember when Trump went to Saudi Arabia there, and they got a huge deal with. So I don't know how they're going to make all these jets. I know you're a big fan of the Airbus, but.
Well, just because I like to survive flights.
There you go.
Leave it there. I know, sorry, that's pretty callous of me, isn't it? But Boeing hasn't exactly wrapped itself in glory lately, has it? So, but whatever.
And this one here, this is, they say there's been some election tampering, and the Canadians scream about it, and so do always that the Americans are the threat to democracy. But a U.S. attorney said the Canadians have been indicted for 20 years of voting illegally in North Carolina. That's from Elon Musk. And here's a reminder.
20 years.
Hey, here's a reminder of how hard our Liberal MPs have been working for us here in Canada. They're going to sit for 73 whole days. Not bad, eh?
Can you imagine that?
You've got a poll you want to talk about. We got a bunch of slides here from a poll that just came out. 61% of Canadians say federal government is too focused on Trump instead of tackling, and this is what we talked about at the top of the show here. We're wasting too much energy on Trump and not enough on what really matters.
Yeah, and then there's another one here saying, what's your biggest concern? The pie chart there, or sort of like a pie chart. 79% says cost of living, housing, healthcare. No. And then 21% are bothered about Trump primarily. I mean, this is the sort of stuff, though. To be fair, I've mocked Pierre Poilievre a little bit, or said quite negative things about him for his campaign. But his instincts were exactly this, and he thought, no, I'm not gonna talk about Trump, because what people really care about is this. And it's kind of, he'll be looking at this poll and he'll just be thinking, like, I knew that was more important, and yet still, for that brief moment when the hysteria was at its sort of peak,
but who else knows it?
It was enough to win the election.
Who else knows it? The people that are trying to pay the bills and put food on the table. That's who knows it. But the boomers who sold out Canada don't have many of these concerns because they're living in paid-off homes and all that stuff. And they watch CBC. They eat it like it's pablum. They're there eating all the the rhetoric that comes down. And, you know, they were definitely all freaked out about Trump. And this is what we get. A large majority of Canadians, 85%, they're tired of hearing about Trump. Yeah, because we're sitting on some of the biggest riches in the world. We're sitting on them, literally sitting on them.
I mean, this is interesting. If you look down, 70% of 18 to 44-year-olds said the government is too focused on Donald Trump. That just vindicates or proves what you just said, really, doesn't it? That it was the older demographic that had the luxury to kind of relax a little bit and read the newspaper and watch CBC and get really angry about Donald Trump, rather than the self-inflicted wounds that Canadian society is suffering from.
Yeah, so according to Carney, there's two concerns, right? The tariffs and temporary foreign workers. That's the two concerns Canadians have. That's it.
We need
right?
to undercut people's salaries so that we can make more, so businesses can make more profits. Big, huge, like oligarchical businesses, and something about Trump. Okay. Yeah.
I've been saying this on my LinkedIn
Carney.
for a couple of years, and during the Trudeau thing, it's elitism that the problem is. So you have the benefit of the few at the expense of the many. Temporary foreign workers benefits the few, the companies that want cheap labor. And it hurts the mass, the population, with no access to healthcare. You know what I mean? How many Canadians don't have a doctor? DB promised that all British Columbians would have a doctor. There's 1.3 million or something that didn't have access. There's no way he's going to hit that target. But in Canada, we have actually people dying in the waiting room. So no access to healthcare. Rent's escalating. People can't afford rent or their mortgage. Can't get kids into school because the schools in that are running a program where they can actually make more money off foreign students than they can off Canadian students. So who are they going to take? And now they're crying because they're saying they can't get enough of foreign students. So it's who pays for this? Who pays so that a few can benefit greatly from it?
It's we, the peasantry, isn't it? As someone in the comments was saying, we're all just peasants, really.
Yeah, but I mean,
to
Carney.
quote John Lennon.
So then, is Carney listening to the people? Because if he says the two priorities that people have, and according to the survey, it's not. The two priorities are Trump and his tariffs, and two, the temporary foreign workers. They need access to temporary foreign workers. So how is he not getting that people just need to be able to afford to pay their rent, pay their mortgage, buy gas, because you don't need gas, according to Gabo. You don't need gas, and you don't need a road. And your students don't need jobs. So they're not
You
getting...
don't need electricity either, really. I mean, maybe from time to time you can have some electricity.
Just look at the raw data and then just ask the people around you. And Trump, the Liberals are very good at the scaremongering, and the CBC and the CTV help them. They make a boogeyman. They have, and the boogeyman during COVID was obviously COVID. You're killing your grandmother. You're killing everybody. You need to comply. And now they have Trump as their boogeyman. But,
climate change is another one which can be used to guilt trip people, where you say, the classic one is, if we don't stop driving cars around and stuff like that, then our grandchildren won't be able to sort of inhabit this planet, or something ridiculous like that. That's another one that's been used.
5 minutes. We're going to try and power through the rest of these here. Is there only one side of the debate welcome in Canadian universities? I'm going to go with yeah. Yeah.
Well, look, they both, and what's interesting there is both left and right leaning students, majorities just about, agree that there is a safe point of view on controversial topics. Yeah. So that's across the political spectrum. And everybody knows that, don't they? Come on, for God's sake. Yeah. Everybody knows that there's a steady, safe thing to say.
Just going to speed along here, and the CTV pumping up the McVeggie burger. Why not, eh? And then somebody says, "Well, I'd rather you just eat a beef burger," like a health sciences academic.
That's pretty funny thing to say, isn't it?
Like, I mean, these concoctions that they make up. Like, if you were worried about your health, like, geez. And then
I mean, you can see what looks like a kind of a carrot maybe there, but realistically, yeah, it's not going to be much in the way of vegetables.
And this is getting a lot of push. Big Pharma definitely pushing back here. RFK announced CDC will be cleaning house, removing health officials responsible for causing catastrophic COVID failures. I actually have the Justice Center on today, later today, and we're going to be talking about their COVID report. That's why I put this in here, right? I mean, Big Pharma has its tentacles wrapped around. There's some of the biggest lobbyists on both sides of the border. Some of the biggest lobbyists on both sides of the border. You got to wonder why. Shouldn't people just want to eat better, eat better?
And particularly influential in the world of media. Very, they spend a lot of money on advertising. And when you're the biggest advertiser for a media outlet, you can start making threats and demands. And, that's happened in the past, hasn't it?
And then here's a story. Again, here's some more scaremongering. What could drought-stricken forests mean for Canada's fall foliage? So you're not going to get leaves turning color.
You were looking forward to that, weren't you? You thought that would be a nice, cheap joy that you could go and avail yourself of. Another thing to hide under your bed for, I can guarantee, like trees that die from drought, if you don't water something, they die. But that's has nothing to do with other than that's what it is, right? But to make this story into something that it's not is just like ridiculous. Another academic, right? So there you go. Watch what you read, watch what you eat, watch everything. Eat better. And for God's sakes, help us share this out there. And if you're still watching CBC, explain to us why. We'd like to know why. Well, I do it just to see what they're up to.
We have to do it. We have to do it so we can put it on here.
Yeah.
But I still am puzzled. I mean, that piece there from that CBC reporter there blaming Trump for Northvolt, that is just like gaslighting, absolute gaslighting.
Well, today on the Radio 1, on the big news show, like the biggest one of the day, they were doing a story about what Pierre Poilievre said about temporary foreign workers. And who did they choose to interview, do you think, for this 10 or 15 minute segment? It was somebody from Amnesty International who came and started saying how terrible it is and how migrants deserve X, Y, Z. It's kind of like we're talking about Canada here. We don't need Amnesty International.
Again, we got to end here at 10 sharp. I just want to say I have Walter Gray on if you're a local here, the Kelowna's longest serving mayor. And he'll be on at 11 o'clock celebrating his 85th birthday. Also have at 11:30, I have Brennan Day, the health critic for rural health care for the Conservative Party, the health critic of the NDP, and then also the Justice Center later, and then also the Bitcoin show. So busy day here on Now Media. And we'd like you to like, subscribe, and share this out there as much as you can. And we appreciate that. And me and Ian will be back tomorrow morning for Friday's show on the Really Big Show. Again, we appreciate all your comments and everything. And for that said, thank you for watching Now Media.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.